Welcome to Herself, a space for women to have deep conversations about the intersection between spiritual entrepreneurship and fulfilling your potential, so you can become the woman you truly are in every area of your life. After being in business for over 2 decades, I've learned, as you likely have too, that as you grow your business grows you in unexpected, often challenging, yet miraculous ways. Here, we'll talk about how to get out of your own way so you can grow a business that's abundant and sustainable while allowing you to be a force for good in the world. I'll give you simple, actionable strategies as well as wisdom and inspiration to help you root into your wholeness, lead from your values, and work in ways that feel deeply aligned so you can bring your true self into the world through your business and in every area of your life. Hey there, beautiful. This August, I am stepping away from the mic to honor 2 major life transitions: getting married and moving to France. Yes, it is a season of deep change, and I am choosing to savor it fully. But even as I step back, I still want to show up for you in a meaningful way. So this summer, I'm bringing you a curated series of powerful conversations with some of the most respected voices in the internal family systems, or IFS, community. And these episodes explore what it really means to do our inner work, not by fixing or forcing ourselves, but by meeting every part of us with compassion and curiosity. This work has transformed not only my own healing, but also the way that I support my clients. And I know it will speak to you too. So whether you're hearing these episodes for the first time or revisiting them with fresh ears and a fuller heart, may they be a mirror, an anchor, a reminder of your own inner wisdom. I will be back with brand new episodes in September, broadcasting from my new home in France. Until then, may this season bring you clarity and deep nourishment. And now, here's this week's conversation. You've invested in yourself, done the therapy, taken the certification trainings, been on the retreats. You've bought the marketing courses, hired the coaches. Heck, you've even visited the Akashic records. Yes, you have done everything right. And yet, you still feel like you're walking 2 separate paths. One leads to your truth, the other leads to success. But they have never felt like the same road. You have one foot on the gas, one foot on the brake, and you're tired of pretending that's not a problem. What if now is your time to stop choosing between your soul and your strategy, between your healing and your ambition? What if this is the year you become the self-led steward of a business that reflects all of you? Welcome to Herself CEO, a conscious business immersion and internal family systems circle for spiritual women ready to lead from within. This isn't just about building a business for the sake of it. It's about building a business that feels like home, one that's sustainable, profitable, and sacred, one that honors your nervous system, your cycles, your soul. Inside this container, you'll learn to lead your business from your wholeness, not your wounds. Clarify your offerings, your message, and your mission. Create consistent, soul-aligned revenue without self-abandonment. And root your visibility, systems, and strategy in your values, not a fleeting trend. This is the only program like this that exists. The only internal family systems and feminine spirituality-based business program of its kind for coaches, therapists, creatives, healers who are here to change the world and stay well while doing it. We open for early enrollment in July, and our journey officially begins in the fall. You are not behind. You are not too sensitive. You are not too late. You are right on time. And this circle is being prepared for you. You can join the waitlist now to be the first to know when doors open for early registration this July. Head to sarahavaughtstover.com/CEO. That's sarahavaughtstover.com/CEO. sarahavaughtstover.com/CEO. Because your business isn't just a business. It's a living vessel for your soul's work. And it's time to lead from your true self.
And we also live in such an individualized society that the trend is to move towards the individual constantly and away from community, away from connection. So the individualized society in the combination of clinical training, I think, has masked this really large way that mental health services delivered is for individual. And I think individual is really important. I go to individual therapy and I've been in individual therapy. So I'm not saying at all that this individual therapy isn't really important. I'm just saying there's a hole in what people have available to them in their capacity to access and learn, about their internal system, and also learn about how to be connected with each other.
Welcome to Herself, an internal family systems and women's spirituality podcast, and a space for you to come home to your innate wholeness and wisdom. You're in the right place if you're devoted to showing up for not only your outer, but also your inner life with courage and compassion. And if you feel inspired to do that in the good company of other women who are also committed to cultivating greater and greater levels of inner peace and outer fulfillment. I'm your host, Sarah Avant Stover, the author of 3 books, a certified internal family systems practitioner, and a pioneering teacher of women's spirituality for the past 24 years and counting. Here, we explore all different facets of a woman's spiritual and healing journey, both the pretty and the not so pretty parts. And we do this through wisdom talks, practical guidance for navigating the ups and downs of our paths with more grace and gusto, and conversations with other inspiring wayfinders. Above all, if you're here, you know that your continued deepening also serves the healing of our world. I'm happy you're here. Let's dive in.
All right. Welcome back, Chris.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me back.
And we always start our time here with a little check-in. So I'd love for you to share with us where you're joining us from today, and if there's anything you want to share about how you're doing or any parts that you're bringing into the conversation with you.
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm at home here in Asheville, where we've been hosting Healing Circles trainings. We've done 3 of those so far. I loved having you here. It was really a powerful week. Yeah, feeling really great. I've got several more scheduled that, and all of them are full, and we're excited about continuing the work and other opportunities that may look at ways of spreading, working in IFS groups in different places. So yeah, we're excited about what's coming up and the possibilities.
Great. Yeah, just looking at your space there, I feel nostalgic for our time there. It was a really, really great week. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to having a deeper conversation about this with my wider community, because I think it's a really important thing to understand at a deeper level, both for potential attendees to circles, but also people who want to facilitate them.
Yeah.
So just to back up for people, I want to mention that you did join us last year at about this time, and we were talking about our critic and perfectionist parts. And anyone who wants to go back to listen to that was episode 106. And today we're here to talk about this other dimension of your work, which includes your new book, which I recommend everyone pick up a copy of. It is Creating IFS Healing Circles. And towards the end of the training that I did with you the other month, you shared with our group a dream that you had that inspired you to bring this work more fully into the world. Can you share with us a bit about that dream?
Yeah, I was in a spiritual retreat, and it was a 13-day spiritual retreat. And some of the retreat was focusing on dream work, was sort of deep contemplation about what our purpose is, what's our contribution, who are we, kind of letting go of part of our lives that may be formed under survival and how much we're feeding those survival dances, and moving. I was sort of in my 40s at the time, maybe we're approaching 40. And that's kind of the time of life where you began to look a little bit more downhill, thinking, what's my contribution? What am I supposed to contribute to the world? What's my impact? And so much of my life felt at the time built on survival and, just trying to make it, I think I had a couple of young children at the time, and just, trying to be a good therapist, that I hadn't had time to really think about what's my impact, what's my purpose. It was kind of an unusual dream. Us folks that are Southern, in the southern part of the states, our barbecue is kind of really important part of our life. And and where you go to eat barbecue, and, is a Southern tradition. So in the dream, I saw serving barbecue kind of out of a football concession stand, and tend to be a block building that has a big open window, and people sort of come up and you serve them and they go. And there's sort of a long line of people being served. And I was serving barbecue. It was sort of my own special recipe of barbecue within the dream. And, and in the dream, I asked, what is it that I'm serving? What is it that I'm creating? What are people coming for? And what I heard is that you're serving healing circles. You're creating serving healing circles. And I was in IFS training, which was before Zoom. We all sat in a circle. And so I began to look at sort of all of the circles I had set in, and how important circle has been for people since the beginning, that people in community sat or in a circle around the fire. There was talking circles where people spoke their truth. They made decisions based on what was going to, care for their village, and a circle has no leader. It has people's voice. It has a place for the voice to be heard, and the voice of the self, the voice of the wise self, to come into the circle. And it's not always, so it's not hierarchical. It's a place where the wisdom can come in to serve people. And so that's a little bit where creating healing circles came from. And then began to look at more and more, like how are we getting people really deeply into IFS? How are people learning about the work? And it's all done in circles, so I've tried to train people individually. Richard Schwartz has tried to train people individually, but early on he found that the best way to learn a model was in a group setting. And then I began to think, well, we're training people to really facilitate the model for individuals. And then as I stepped back further and looked at where group therapy has evolved to, group therapy is, and maybe I'm wrong, but it's mostly been pretty well eradicated from clinical practices. There are still groups therapy that's done maybe in treatment facilities, maybe some mental health facilities, whole groups, maybe there's some parenting groups. AA definitely, is a group setting. But as far as a clinical training program that specifically focuses on learning to be a facilitator, those are gone. And I did some surveys for people in IFS trainings. Some people maybe got one class in group facilitator skills. Some people maybe got 2 classes. Mostly they participated in an experiential group that was kind of an existential group. That was kind of a traditional group that's type of group that's done and for most people. But how to facilitate group therapy is kind of like, how do you facilitate family therapy, and there's special skills in facilitating family therapy that's different than individual skills. And a lot of those skills have been ones that I've used as being a lead trainer. So I felt like there was a hole missing. And we also live in such an individualized society that the trend is to move towards the individual constantly. And away from community, away from connection. So the individualized society in the combination of clinical training, I think, has masked this really large way that mental health services delivered is for individual. And I think individual is really important. I go to individual therapy. I've been in individual therapy. So I'm not saying at all that this individual therapy isn't really important. I'm just saying there's a hole in what people have available to them in their capacity to access and learn, about their internal system, and also learn about how to be connected with each other.
So we'll unpack different pieces of that as we go.
Yeah. Thanks.
And so you had that dream initially at around 40 or in your early 40s.
Yeah.
And can I ask how old you are now?
I'm 58. I'll be 58 in a couple of days.
Okay. Well, happy birthday.
Thank you.
So do you feel that this is like your core body of work for this later season of your life that you're here to like more fully usher in?
I feel like it's one core body of work. I'm hoping to sort of train a critical mass of folks that want to carry the work. What you're, when you sort of reach 50 age, you're no longer the hub of anything because you're just not going to be around long enough, to carry it. So I'm hoping that that's one reason we wrote the book, is to really try to ignite an interest in group work. And also I think, and hopefully you experience this, but doing IFS in a group is really, really powerful. And the depth and the multi-dimensionality that you can work in group is sometimes hard to get to in individual therapy, and also kind of what shows up in group, is day-to-day life. Some of the hidden, unhealed places don't show up as strong. So I'm hoping to sort of support the conversation. I don't think my body of work is meant to be like the body of work. It's meant to like support other conversations. There's other trainers that have a lot of passion for group work. I'm hoping that their books come out. I'm hoping that this, that it just kind of begins to move the tide a little bit more towards community building. So I'm hoping more to really engage the conversation than like, create another model or something.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. Like one of the things that I think I said during that week was this feels like 3D IFS. Like individual IFS has been so powerful for me. And that's what led me to want to become trained and certified in it and share it in the ways that I do. But then it took it to a whole new level to be in a group. And that's also why I want to have this conversation, because I feel like a lot of people don't really understand what's possible if we break out of this mold of just doing the one-on-ones and start stepping into groups.
Yeah.
So I also wanted to name that you seem to bring in a lot of different influences into your group facilitation. And we talked about dream work, and in one of the days in the training, we sculpted someone's dream, and you've had a lot of different experiences in groups. Can you speak about like the different influences that have been a big part of your life that you weave into these healing circle experiences?
Yeah, I started, my first group was a men's group that I joined at 25. And then I was in the men's movement with Robert Bly and James Hillman, Michael Mead. I was in the Denver Men's Council. That was a large men's group. And we did sort of large gatherings for men in group settings. And then we spent all day Sunday talking about it and learning about how to be a community, with each other, and how to be honest and have conflict and also have connection. And there's other men's movement like the Mankind Project and different men's, kinds of councils that are continued or kind of similar to that. So there's a lot of influence from that in building community and in doing my own work inside a group. I studied a lot with Alpesos and psychomotor, which is kind of it's a parts work that has sculpting and psychodrama, along with that. I've been in Gestalt groups, psychodrama groups, and then IFS has been trained in a group setting for, since the beginning. So in family therapy is a kind of form of group therapy in a way. So having, whole families and, mothers and fathers doing multifamily group, ran a multifamily group for a while, couples group. So yeah. And I think being an only child, I really enjoyed being in intentional community with people. And so, yeah, all of those things kind of influence the work, and it helps to kind of boil down to kind of what are the essential elements of the group work. And I've honed into the experiential components to it, that I found the experiential work. The processing can be building, it can be really important, and can be bonding for people to be able to tell their story and be heard and be seen. But that alone doesn't do the deep healing, deep work. So and our tendency is to do a little bit more sit and process, because it's more familiar. So the pushing, the the envelope to the deeper experiential work is something that's been more transformative to me. I can't tell you what conversation I had in a group. I can tell you what sculpting I did. I can tell you a sculpting I did when I was 27 years old with Al Pesos that had a huge shift to my relationship with my dad. So that experiential work lives in me. I can't tell you what conversations we had as a group setting. So the experiential work, I think, goes much deeper.
If you are feeling inspired to be part of an IFS healing circle, I have some good news. Like I mentioned at the start of the conversation today, doors are now open to the next round of my signature IFS and Women's Spirituality 6-week program, Becoming Whole. And doors are open until this Wednesday, June 14th. So this program takes you in depth into an accessible, safe, and transformative path for healing your deepest wounds, for healing unresolved wounds, for healing traumas, for healing unwanted behaviors, lingering feelings of shame and unworthiness, for healing patterns of burnout, all of these types of things, supporting you if you're in a season of life where there's a lot of upheaval or transition, so that you can really make real lasting peace, not only with yourself, but also with your life. So these are skills and practices that you will be able to carry with you to enhance your quality of life for the rest of your life. And some of my students have said this is like a year of therapy in 6 weeks, that this is like an umbrella course that all my other work fits under, and it makes everything else sink in more. And a big component in how we work together in Becoming Whole is through this kind of group work. And while there is an option to work more independently, if that appeals to you, there's also the option to do this kind of healing work in a safe women's community. So this is for women at any stage on our healing and spiritual journey. We've had retirees, coaches, social workers, therapists, artists, veterinarians, and more join us in the past. So if you want to learn more to be part of this kind of a group experience with other women like you, I invite you to head to becomingwholeifs.com. That's becomingwholeifs.com. And again, doors close in just a few days. If it feels right, I would love to have you. And now back to our conversation with Chris. We've mentioned sculpting a few times now. Can you share with listeners what sculpting is? Because that's a big part of what these circles are about.
Yeah, I think it's a skill that like when IFS individual work, you learn insight and you learn direct access. I think those are the two core things you're learning, is how to help someone go inside and find their parts, or how to talk to a part in direct access. I think sculpting is the core element for group work. And sculpting is where you have people role play different elements of themselves within the group. So you may have someone role play your manager, someone role play your firefighter, you may tease out kind of what these parts are saying to you, what their posture is, what space they hold, what their proximity to each other, what is the sort of dynamic between those parts, how that dynamic then impacts other systems. So you can really sort of take a step back and take a look at the systemic dynamics that are unfolding in the system, and also find out a little bit how the self is held in the system. And parts can sort of rise and settle, and so as the conflict rises, what happens to the self, or the person's self energy, and as they settle, where's the self energy, and then looking at how those parts formed. I always say, if we don't understand a part, go back into the point in which it formed, and then it really makes sense. So those parts are often still operating in a time and space in which they formed, which is what I call the field. We can find out what field are these parts responding to and reacting in. And a lot of the extreme or maladaptive behaviors that formed under trauma. So that trauma is still living in the body, in the person's field, and the parts are still operating from that same point of reference. So all of that has a lot of potential for shifts and movement and healing that can take place.
In our training each day, just for listeners to understand, each day, one of us, and there were 10 participants, one of us received a sculpt and also facilitated a sculpt. And the sculpt that I received, it was very, I think everyone felt this way about their own sculpt, but it was very powerful. And I think I shared in the group that I had visited that particular field a lot in my one-on-one sessions and done a lot of healing around that field a lot. But there was something that really deeply shifted by enacting or like building that scene in actual space and time around me. And we even did like a clearing of it. So I felt that like the actual dissolution of that particular field that had a lot of trauma in my past. And it was able to go deeper into it than all the one-on-one sessions that I'd done. I'm sure all those helped, me to get to
definitely.
that point, but it was just, like I said earlier, just took it to a new level, took the healing to a new level.
Yeah. Something really powerful that like all 10 participants were there to support your healing. Everyone was invested in sort of wanting for you, wanting that healing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, that because that particular scene, I was very alone. And as many of us are in those traumatic moments, we're alone and we don't have the support that we need. And to have all of you there supporting me, being actually in that moment, in that field with me, it was, there aren't even words to describe it.
I was getting a little emotional just talking about it, because I think the feeling like, kind of the love in the room, and also the love that you needed and deserved, in that time that wasn't there, to be able to create that or receive that's a really powerful thing. That's, I think it's one thing to sort of have the love of your therapist, but to have the love of, colleagues, people to just really want the best for you is a really powerful, component of the healing circles.
Yeah. And that brings us to community. And it seems like community is really one of your core values. And these circles really are about creating community. And we are so community starved in the world right now. And can you speak more about how these circles can help us to heal, to shift out of such an individualistic culture?
Well, I think I started looking at some of my individual work, and a lot of people come to individual therapy to try to find community, whether it's to find a partner or to improve their family of origin, or to get along better with their relatives or their in-laws, or trying to heal friendships. Something Albert Adler said is, all problems are relational, so if all problems are relational, then a lot of the DSM-4, we could say, DSM-4 or whatever, 3R or 5, whichever one it is now, focuses on the individual, that these are individual psychopathologies, so, but if all problems are relational, that doesn't kind of make a lot of sense in a way, so if we're looking at trying to heal something as an individual psychopathology, and then the person is going to go back and form community, but the problem formed as a breakdown of community because someone wasn't there for you in the moments of trauma, because you didn't have someone to go to when you were overwhelmed by shame, or not feeling protected. So getting off track a little bit, I think, but
I think it's a helpful reframe.
Yeah. So the antidote sort of has to match, the problem, so that's a little bit. And so to expect someone to kind of, and a lot of healing can happen in an individual, but I wasn't seeing people take the individual healing and then going out in a society and rebuilding a community. The community, a lot of times the community didn't exist. There wasn't her circles to belong to. AA is one of those where and some people belong there, some people feel like they don't belong there. Some people belong for a while and then don't belong, but it's not like we have these really enriched community gathering spaces that go and belong to, that maybe people find it in a religious space, for a while, we just need more of a critical mass of folks that recognize what the power of the circle, the power of being a community, of being an intentional community. Like, I think that what I would want for my children is that there's lots of places where community belongs. If they're going through postpartum, depression after a child, there's a woman's group or women's community that they can go to belong to, that's built in, and people recognize what women need in those moments. There's communities where men have, it's time for my son to begin the rites of passage, and there's a healthy, intentional community of men that kind of help him walk through that process. Or for my daughter to have a rites of passage women's group that she goes through, and she's mentored through that phase in her life. There's no sort of reason our society can't have those intentional spaces. We've lost it. We don't. At one point, I think we did have intentional spaces like that. We did have ritual that was designed for that supported developmental processes of people, but we've lost a lot of that. And what Francis Weller talks about is one of the gates of grief is we come in expecting to have that place of belonging, and we don't have it. We've lost it. So there's a lot of potential for, our society to be a whole lot more connected and a lot more supportive of the healing of each other. And, we're kind of, I think, in a mad rush to try to create that.
Yeah. And, just for listeners, you mentioned Francis Weller, and you're referring to his book, The Wild Edge of Sorrow,
right?
Which is a wonderful book for anyone experiencing grief or loss about anything at all, individual or collective.
Yeah. And there's grief that we don't even know that we're carrying, like this one of that deep down inside, we all know that we're longing for community and we're grieving not having it, and I think that's a common sometimes. And when we can't put our finger on it, it comes out as anxiety, it comes out as shame, it comes out of, that there's something wrong with me, or depression, so when we can't put it out, and it comes out as a somatic or symptom kind of way.
And you mentioned early on that there are some parts of us that can really only be healed in groups. Can you speak about that more? Like what kinds of parts of us can we identify within ourselves that could benefit, that could heal, could grow by being part of a group like this?
I think I probably would change that a little bit. I would maybe, I probably wrote that and I would change it a little bit later. But I think that there's something when we sit in a room of other people, there's something emerges inside of us that's unhealed. And in individual therapy, that doesn't quite emerge. So my social anxiety, my therapist, my social anxiety doesn't really show up real time with my unless I can recall it or talk about a time that I felt socially anxious, but in a real time setting, that social anxiety isn't emerging, but if I go into a new group of people that I don't know and I sit down, that anxiety is right there. It's right there present with me, and the dangers that my partners believe is right in the room along with me. So I think the catalyst for they're bringing up what's unsettled, and then to experience that kind of, that people go from being unsafe to being deeply safe, and not only deeply safe, but deeply wanting me to heal, to be in my best self. There's a transformation that can happen in those settings. It's hard to get all of those elements, in other settings, so I think the healing potential to bring up, but also to heal, is certain elements of our traumas around relationships, have a deep potential within a group setting. And not say that some of those healings they occur and we don't feel better. And I get help with my social anxiety in individual setting. And I'm a little bit more extroverted. And I'm a little more comfortable in large groups. All those things definitely can help, but there's a deeper level that you might get to in group work that you maybe, didn't get to. And I think this goes back to kind of what you said earlier. There's spaces that you've worked, but there's another kind of level that you can kind of get to at times.
Yeah, and it seems to happen, or I experienced it more in real time when I was in the group. So for example, on our first day, our first morning there, when we all just sat down the circle the first time, and you guided us inside to see what parts are here at the forefront, because these are usually the parts that are running our lives and they're scanning for safety. And one of the biggest parts for me that I became more aware of was the part of me that's just so concerned with, are they going to like me? Am I going to fit in? And it was like almost obsessive about it, and just wondering that, how can I come across so that people like me? And just to go from that to the sculpt experience that I had, where those parts were just not asking those questions anymore. They were completely relaxed because I just felt so loved and seen. And that was only within the course of a few days.
Yeah. I think that's kind of what we're trying to talk to Sarah, that those parts that they walk in the door with you, and one of the things that we did, and is even before we do our introduction or even say who we are or say where we're from or start making connections, like who just walked in the door with you, from the very beginning, because those are the parts that are scanning our environment and trying to keep us safe, and begin to befriend those parts that they protected us for so long for good reasons, and to get to know those to start with. And because they often settle pretty soon, like once we just kind of introduce ourselves, find one or two people that we relate to, those parts kind of like can settle a good bit, but we might miss them. They may settle so quick that we miss them and not get to know them.
Yeah, I lead a lot of IFS circles online for women. And one of the main reasons why women want to come to these circles is to learn to use their voice more, or to just show up more powerfully in a group, to heal that social anxiety. And it's more challenging for some than others. And I think online it can be even more challenging, just in the Zoom environment, to just have that courage to unmute yourself and speak up. And you talked about the danger of resting in the critic observer space within a group, and how that can damage, or how that can prevent a group from deepening. And I find that to be one of the biggest challenges in leading online circles, is to help women to either first become aware of the critic observer role and help them to lean in more. But can you talk more about the critic observer and how that works in a group?
I think it's a natural tendency when we're observing something to critique it, and it's a major way of keeping a distance, to not being vulnerable, and the lack of sort of awareness of it. We have movie critics, we have food critics, we have anything that we're partaking in, we have a tendency to be trained to critique it, so not recognize. Sometimes it can be a bit like your ear. You can't see that's actually the part that you're in, so close to you. But in a group dynamic, it can really keep the group from being safe and going deeper, and for people to be able to share themselves. So one of the principles that we work with is, sort of everybody's stepping into the soup together, that we're all revealing our vulnerability and we're sharing that vulnerability. And I think, from day one, I said, and I'm going to do a sculpt too. I'm a member of the group, and I'm going to do a sculpt too. And so that, I'm not a critic observer as well, that I'm also going to be sharing my vulnerability within the group setting. So that's the nature of the circle, is that everyone is is committing to show up and to be open and vulnerable, and talk about what they need in order to do that. And that the norming phase is where you go about trying to norm to get enough safety to have a brave enough space that people can share their vulnerabilities together.
Can you talk about the different stages of the group forming and storming
Yeah.
process?
Yeah. And the originator author of that is skipping my mind right now. It's in the book. The references that's in the book. But it's a simple one. It's just the forming. It goes forming, storming, norming, and performing. So it has 4 stages to a group. And for a long time, I thought maybe if I did a group perfectly, we wouldn't have the storming phase. And I found that really wasn't possible. That it's the way that you go through storming that makes a big difference in how you norm more deeply and how you get to a phase where people are really performing together. So the storming doesn't have to be harmful. Definitely, we don't want it to be harmful. The storming can be the space where we learn to speak our truth and tell the truth to each other and to ask for more of what we want and negotiate for our needs. But we all go through that stage of forming and storming. Norming is when we talk about how are we going to be together? How are we going to interact? And norming can be as simple as what music do we play? Do we leave the window open? Do we go to the bathroom whenever we need to? Do we do groups? Do we speak to each other with our fix-it parts? How do we, how are we going, how direct or how honest or how, how much caretaking are we going to have? So there's lots of different elements that comes into the normings of how we're going to be together. And then anytime the group changes, you start back over with forming. There's maybe some storming, the norming. You have to re-norm because you have a new member and you have to get to another level of participating.
Yeah, the storming part reminds me of even just, in an intimate relationship, even if you have a really great relationship, there's still going to be conflict.
Yep.
And when we handle that conflict with care, it allows us to have a deeper relationship. It's like drops us into a new level together. And storming does that for a group. So it's a positive thing.
Yeah. Every couple goes through that. And the way that you go through that is the way that you kind of build that relationship to be stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are the things that you've noticed within yourself have really healed and transformed as a result of healing circles?
Yeah, one of the biggest things I would say, there's the new book that's coming out, All of Us, that Jenna is putting out. I have a chapter in there on healing circles. And when I started writing it, someone asked me a question early, I think I was in an ACOA meeting. It said, finish the question, people are, and I finished the question, people are dangerous and unpredictable and selfish, and then the next piece is, look at how does that shape how you are in the world? How does that shape the world in which you interact in? And that always stuck with me. Like, in that when I would go back to my social anxiety or fear, or maybe I had a training that I got some feedback that felt really hurtful, that burden, that belief, that burden would come up over. And then looking at being in groups, I think a lot of my group work was trying to heal that belief that people were dangerous, unpredictable, and selfish, and in group settings, people were not that, and in other places I would sort of still experience it, but in group settings and IFS settings, and even in early days of when I was in churches, people were very generous to each other. There was this people are not always that way, and so really getting that changed and shifted, so now for me, if I finish the question, people are playmates, people are support system, people are resources, people are loving and beautiful, people have huge potential to transform society, so I think that's a tremendous shift in my own perspective around just my relationship to other people and community, but it's taken a lot of group work and a lot of internal work to have that shift and change.
Yeah, that is a big shift.
Mm.
So for anyone who's interested in doing this group work, both who's interested in being part of it and someone who's interested in leading it, let's start with the person who's interested in being part of it. What would you say to them?
There's lots of places to do group work. I think right now we're able to hold about 6 a year. There's 10 people, so that's about 60 people that I can accommodate, right now for the Healing Circles trainings. I'm not doing it online. I think I can't get to depth of what I want to teach online. Also, I've been online for 3 years, and I just love being with people, so there's some replenishing for me that's happening as well. I went through the breakthrough program at Caron Treatment Center. I did their 5-day treatment program. For a 5-day treatment program, it's very affordable, and they're wonderful facilitators of group work. They've got master group work facilitators there and they've been doing it a tradition for about 40 years. A lot of the things I've taken from the book was from my experience of being at Breakthrough at Caron Treatment, and I think they're in Pennsylvania. There's psychodrama groups that are going on that people get a part of. Hopefully there's going to be more IFS, group works, but get in a group and start to explore. There's a couple of group works in Boston that are more process, experiential process groups. So, if you look around and find it, I mentioned, different things like adult children of alcoholic, ACOA. I don't know if those are still going on anymore. I think different places still have them. So, one of the things that we did, when we were learning IFS early is I got a group of my colleagues together and we just practiced. We did a lot of practice, and I was in consultation and IFS support groups, for a long time with my dear friend Kevin Davis, and I was in a group together, and she's an assistant trainer. And then we ran groups together for many years after that. So, just start, just,
Yeah.
there's got to be, 4 or 5 people in your practice that are struggling with a similar issue. Maybe it's social anxiety or dating, or or how to relate better to my spouse. Ask them to get together and kind of learn by doing it. And
I'm always leading some form of a group that people the women can join.
Yeah, great.
And what about someone who's interested in facilitating? You speak a lot in this book about facilitation skills. What are some things that people should keep in mind as group facilitators?
Well, I think getting kind of getting a contract around how the group is going to relate to each other, and how we're going to handle when we're in conflict, and what does it mean to be a member of a group. And people know how to be individuals. They maybe kind of know how to be in their family. They may know how to be with a significant other, but they don't often know how to be a member of a group, and where your impact and your contribution is beyond you. And that's a major breakdown in an individualistic society, is that people aren't really looking at how do I support the lives of other people, not in a caretaking way, not in a sacrificing way, but how's my presence benefit, the community that I'm in. So, workable agreements, creating very good, strong, workable agreements, asking for what you need, helping people understand what participation in this group means, what they're going to get out of it, what they're going to contribute to it, and having some, skills in that. You also have to time manage and track time. You have to ask people to pause, gently. This is not a social environment. You have to not let the group get hijacked by, I don't know, talking about the Super Bowl, or talking about a play, or a TV show. So you have to be able to keep the group focused and have a therapeutic focus. And then you have to also be able to work with your own system if you do get confronted for something in front of a group. Public humiliation can be very strong and encompassing. So if that's something that's been hard for you, having a co-facilitator for a while to support you, if you did get someone to sort of come after you with some disgruntled feelings, and how you can kind of hold your seat of self in those moments. So I think those are kind of essential elements of getting started and doing group work.
Yeah, it is a different way of operating. In one of my groups, that's more of like a long-term group, we had a stormy experience a couple of weeks ago, and because I had come back from your training and I had started to see a tendency of someone got triggered by something in the circle or by someone else, that they would leave and say, I need to take a break, or they'd send me an email.
Mm-hmm.
And so we brought that into the circle. It's like, what do we need to do in order for you to bring your upset to the circle?
Mm-hmm.
What does it take to bring that upset to the circle, to share it with the circle, so that it can be seen and witnessed within the group, rather than just leaving and processing it on your own, or just trying to process it with me one-on-one. And it was really powerful. And then that opened up a whole new level of truth telling and vulnerability, and things that other people had been withholding, parts that they had been just not expressing, not sharing in the group. And it was powerful.
Yeah. Wonderful. That takes a lot of courage to bring that in to the group, and great facilitation.
Yeah. But I think we're not used to being part of groups like that, where it's about, let's tell the truth to each other. If there's something on our minds, let's say it together. And that it's safe to do that.
And that you can actually do it and have a relationship be stronger as a result of that.
Yeah.
A lot of times we avoid it because we believe that the relationship's going to disintegrate and we're going to lose it, so we don't do it. But, those strong relationships are ones that we can be honest, be truthful in. Great. Wonderful. Great job.
Thanks. Yeah. And being in the group, the training really helps me to do that, gave me the courage to do that.
Yeah. So
can you lead us through a brief parts exercise of some sort that relates in some way to what we're talking about today? Just because I know that a big part of what you're up to is experiential learning. Yeah. And I know that listeners can get a lot from what we're talking about, but they're also going to get something different if you guide them through an experience. Would that be okay with you?
Yeah. Well, let's maybe do the people are exercise, and folks can kind of gather a little bit of that, what's there for them. So yeah. So if you just kind of go inside a moment, and we'll just start off with the word people. When I say the word people, just notice which people, what people do you focus on? Do you focus on the people in your current world? Do you focus on people in your family? Or do you focus on the larger society of people? Like, which people do you focus on? And maybe just noticing as you sort of scan this people, which one gathers your attention? Where do you gather some trepidation? Maybe it's a certain group of people. Maybe it's people that have differences than you. And then we'll just finish people are, and then filling in the blank, just noticing what qualifier words come up. And it could be more on the unsafe side. It could be more towards belonging. It could be a kind of a continuum between belonging and unsafe. And just noticing what's alive in your system. If you get something in the more towards the unsafe slant, maybe just notice if there's a part that experienced something that made them feel like people were unsafe or dangerous or unpredictable. And if you're leaning more towards the safety side, maybe just notice what relationship you've had inside those parts that helps them feel more safe. Or just let yourself notice without judging or evaluating, just noticing. Our natural inclination to turn towards people and community. And maybe if you found a part, maybe just see which part that is. If it's a protector, young part, you can hang out them for a minute and see if they can tell you what caused them to feel this way. What event or events or place and time or experiences what created that feeling and belief and reality for them. And then maybe just see if they have any awareness of you listening to them, if you can listen to them compassionately or curiously. See if they have any sense of you being there, that self, curious or compassionate self being there with them. And you can see what they need from you. And see what else they need. And just thinking whatever came, whatever you notice, just a beginning of a little inquiry. Maybe of a journey, a beginning of a journey or trailhead to work towards, or something that needs more attention from you. Letting whatever part showed up that you can come back and spend more time with them. When you come back, just slowly come back and taking a moment to just jot down whatever you notice, just to harvest whatever's there. It's okay if there was just a lot of gratitude, that's really wonderful too, or if there was any leftover anxiety, fear, whatever showed up, it's completely okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
As we're nearing the end of our conversation, one question I want to be sure to ask you, because I know some listeners may be wondering, well, maybe I've been thinking about doing one-on-one IFS work, or I'm already doing one-on-one IFS work, or what would you say to people if they, I think the ideal is to do both group work and one-on-one, but if someone can only do one at a particular time in life, what would you suggest?
Well, I think it depends a little bit on their journey with IFS. I think, when I first started out, helping someone navigate their system of 4 or 5 parts was a lot, it was. And so it depends a little bit on your journey, when you start to have kind of more parts in the room, the dynamics of parts, tracking sequences. So it's best to sort of work where we feel our skill sets are. And just learning to do family therapy, was a lot for me, learning to have people in conflict in the same room together, couples having two people in the room is conflict. So it depends kind of where you are in your journey, what you feel like you can handle, how you are, how you're made up. For some of us, or, I'm pretty sensitive. So having lots of people in the room can be a little overwhelming to my system. I usually like quiet restaurants. I don't like now noisy restaurants. So there's a lot of factors there, I think, around who you are and your makeup and kind of what feels manageable to you and what feels fun to you. So I think, work in a way that you feel like it's really beneficial to you and feels like it's where you're making your most impact. I think my conversation is a little bit like, hey, there's this other thing over here too, that you might like to explore, you might find is really beneficial, and we want to have those other options available to us. There's no kind of, you should be doing anything, anytime we do that, a should thing, we're leading from our parts and we're doing it because someone has said this is better than that. We have to sort of listen internally to kind of what, where we are and what we're led to and what we feel passionate about. So yeah, I think to do the work that you feels, in your heart and, maybe if you're curious, about other things, follow up with it. For me, I started writing this book 3 years ago. I was 50, I don't know, 58 or 50, 55, 54, 55, so, and something cultivated when I, inside when I was in my 40s. So sometimes things incubate for quite some time before they're ready to become a delivery system. So don't feel like you're in a rush to do certain things. Like if it incubates inside of you, just let it incubate and follow up with it, see where it leads you. So there's time for things.
And what would you say for someone who's thinking about participating and wondering, like, should I participate in one-on-one work or group work if there's budget constraints, time constraints? Would you say the same thing, just to listen inside and see what you're drawn to, or is there any other guidelines or recommendations you would give someone?
Yeah, I think the individual, for me, if I've got sort of a deep trauma that I can't get over, or, I know there's events that I'm carrying that I need to clear, I'm probably going to go to individual therapists to really focus individually on those things specifically and localize and clear those. If where my relationships I'm having trouble relationally, and I'm scared of people, I got to be with people to get over being scared of people, so then if I can find a healthy group, to belong to help me with that. So it depends a little bit kind of what you're working on, and what's going to be the best thing, so I go to chiropractors, I go to, body workers, I have a wonderful acupressurist, that I go to, so I go to sort of different things for different symptoms, so probably if I did yoga, I would, have to go to less of those, so, but I tend to like to go to those instead of doing the yoga I probably need to be doing. But yeah, so I think, kind of do what really feels best and what feels like what's going to be has the most potential for your healing.
And what is your current growing edge?
My current growing edge, I think it's probably spending more of my time working creatively than I probably have some old, survival patterns of working to survive, and that can take over where I'm kind of doing the work I think I'm supposed to do rather than the work that I'm creatively led to do. So mine is probably working creatively and keeping my eye on a bigger picture, and not spending my day, we call it, doing low-hanging fruit, spend all day answering emails and, doing things that are necessary, but I'm not really working creatively. So I think that's my challenge, is not to get pulled into the low-hanging fruit. And creative work isn't always easy. Sometimes it takes a while to get something really, creatively out. And, so you're working with the unknown a lot more.
Yeah. I think this relates to my next question, which is, like what's next for you? You know, this book is out in the world. You're leading these healing circle trainings, your IFS trainings, and what's next on the horizon?
Yeah, my wife and I have a couple of books that we have. I think we're on the third outline now of it. I think we're on the second outline, and we're just talking last night about a new outline for it, and so it's like a IFS companion guide is one of them that we're working on. Another one is on, how IFS can support you when you're in really, really difficult times, so those are a couple of projects that we're working on together, and we really love writing together. And so yeah. And, I talk about in the book a little bit, being dyslexic, writing is sort of the last thing in the world I want to do, so I would rather be on a podcast with you than write, so committing to really, to doing that. And the book's been really well received. I think we're up to over 1,000 copies so far. And, and so it's been wonderfully received, and people are really, I think, talking about healing circles more, which is kind of the whole growth, all part of it is looking at, how else can we use this model to heal our society. So yeah, that's kind of what we have. Yeah, that's kind of what we have in the back of our mind that we're working on.
Great.
Yeah.
And so just a reminder to listeners, you can get Chris's book, Creating Healing Circles, online, Amazon. And do you want to share your
IFS bookstore too?
IFS bookstore?
Yeah.
Great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's out on Kindle. I don't make very much on Kindle. So if you
yes.
As you know, Sarah, Kindle takes
not much on
not much on the books. We're running Healing Circles trainings. Those 3 for this year are full. I do have a waiting list. Things come up and people move around a bit. So if you're interested in getting on a waiting list, you can email me off my website, burriscounseling.com. Email me there, and there's a link to email me there, and we'll get you on a waiting list. We will be putting together list. So last year we put out 4 at one time. This year we'll probably maybe put out 1 or 2 at a time, and if they heal, we'll add some more to them. But the plan is to try to have six trainings next year, here in Asheville. And my wife feeds you lunch, so
yeah, I highly recommend it.
Fun time.
Yeah, it's a great training.
Yeah,
all around. So I'll put the link to your website and your book in the show notes if listeners want to access those that way. And thank you so much, Chris.
Great, Sarah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me today. And remember, change doesn't come from listening alone. I invite you to commit to taking one small or large, courageous action after today's conversation. One step you can take, if you haven't already, is to sign up for my Sunday journal. It's a weekly newsletter filled with inspiration and reflections about the intersection between spiritual entrepreneurship and fulfilling your potential to help you become the woman you truly are in every area of your life. You can subscribe at programs-sarahavansdover.com/journal. And if you found this podcast valuable, please share it with the women in your world. Also, I'd be very grateful if you'd leave a review. It helps others find resources like this, and I'd love to hear what's coming alive for you after listening today. Above all, keep going, and never forget the unique offerings you and your true self bring to the world. Until next time, I'm sending you my heartfelt support.